Good evening, ladies and gents. Today we are going to start our fourth session of basic skill development of English for public speaking, language writing, presentation, business negotiation and management CPD series. And as usual, as you all know now, it is the fourth day of our program. This will not allow the participant to ask any question during the main session from the speaker, or we will not enable the chat box, or we will not give the opportunity to switch on your mic. And during the Q&A session, you can use the reaction button and you can use the raise hand option to raise any question, and our team will allow you to unmute question first in, first serve method. So then during the session, at the end or middle of the session, we will share a Google Sheet to mark your attendance. And that is the only way that you can mark your attendance and prove that you were here, and to get your certificate. At the end, we will need at least 4 sessions of, at least you have to mark attendance 5 sessions out of 6. So that are the main conditions that you have to remember, as we discussed in last 3 sessions also. And today, conduct this session, the 4th session of our program. We have very known person to you, but I think I have to introduce, because you may not know about him, because he is a director for State Engineering Corporation, and also is the managing director of NSDS Associations Private Limited, and he's a chartered engineer by profession and PMP qualified project manager. And other than that, he's a very dynamic Toastmaster and our past area director, and also past president of ISL Toastmasters Club. That I think you all know his face, and I don't need to introduce him to the audience, because he's the character behind this CSR project. Always, as you always know, Mr. Engineer Nalin De Silva is the presenter today. Mr. Nalin, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to talk about something of movies. I'm sure all of you can see this, and we're going to talk about movies, cinemas, and the films, maybe one of the favorites of yours. Just take for a moment and think for a while, what is the best movie? When it comes to movies or films or the cinemas, you think of what comes to your mind as your favorite and your most memorable movie. Just take a while, take a breath, and memorize yourself. What is the best movie comes to your mind? And don't worry that, don't misunderstand that you have selected the wrong topic, or I have selected the wrong presentation. And yes, we are going to discuss about the presentations and the speeches as well, and what are the tools to attract the audience. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm going to build up an analogy of the movies. Going back to your favorite movies, just think some more about it. Why it is so memorable, and why you like it, why you love it, why you have watched twice or thrice. Maybe the characters, maybe the stronger character, the personality, actor or the actress. Maybe the storyline, the stunning storyline. Maybe from the beginning itself, it's a curious movie. And you start watching it, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Sometimes there are Hindi movies of 3.5 hours. You are at the edge of the seat and looking at the screen with no hesitation at all. The key reason behind of those movies, particularly the great movies, They have that attractive power of the audience, and they have few climaxes. There are some technical words called climaxes. And make sure that your audience is fully attracted. So pretty much the same. If you have a good presentation or a speech, what I like to map it to a movie, an attractive movie, you have to have a good way of attracting the audience from the beginning itself. Let me do some bad beginnings. If I'm to start, because I'm an engineer by profession and I have seen my own mother institute back in IESL, and many of those, the bigger forums, I have seen the big shots by the paper. By the paper, they look so strong and they come on stage and do like this. They come on stage and ask, Sanjay, my voice is clear, Sanjay, and is it okay? Everybody can see me. If it is an online platform, and if it is a physical auditorium, I'm sure that people will ask that, okay, the real audience, the backside, can you hear me? And okay, the mic is good, and Sanjay, how long I have to talk? So that beginning, I have shared recently one video as well, how to start your speech or presentation. And that beginning itself prove to the audience that, okay, this person is just an ordinary presenter. Because ladies and gentlemen, if you couldn't grab the attention of the audience at the beginning, nowadays, the audience have many other options otherwise. They can simply move back to his or her smartphone and go check the Instagram and Facebook and go to social media, or else he can write some emails and get these WhatsApp messages and respond with these business practices. So at the beginning, if you can't attract the audience attention, it doesn't matter how fruitful, how important your content is, still your audience is not with you. Researchers have found that first 1 to 2 minutes time, if you cannot prove them, okay, this speech or a presentation is worth listening, worth attending carefully, and actively listening seems to be important. If you can prove it only, you can go along with the audience. Okay, number 2, the bad number 2. Let me come on stage. Okay, Nalin on stage. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and my name is Nalin S.D. Silva. I've graduated from University of Peradeniya. I'm an electrical and electronics chartered engineer. I'm the past president of blah, 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 and reading out all my bio at the beginning. How you find it? Should I read them out again? Because I was well narrated and introduced by Sanjay today, and coming on stage, and hopefully you might have seen the flyer and you know who the speaker is and you know his or her accolades. Therefore, should I repeat them again? Because I'm on a way to climbing a mountain halfway, and I simply come down to the bottom again and start my speech. I'm sure you might have seen, as I said, that 2 types of beginnings. Many of these big shots, the so-called big shots, come on stage and do these 2 types of blunders, which definitely may not be the best way of starting your speech, may not be the best way of starting your presentation. In today's context, I tried to have a small twist at the beginning. I showed a flyer type of a slide telling that, okay, I'm going to talk about movies. So you might think that, okay, is he mistaken, or is he going to do something else? So that curiosity, I managed to build that curiosity so that the audience think, okay, this is something. So they will think, and they instantly think, okay, what next? What next? Likewise, if you can build up that curiosity again and again, so people think, okay, what comes next? What comes next? So that's the way of grabbing this audience attention. And sometimes you might feel, particularly in online platforms, it's quite difficult. But when it comes to physical platforms, you can see people are not looking at you and you are not in touch with them. Your eye contacts are not in touch with them. And then people take their mobiles out and their heads down, and they're not actively listening to you, they're not laughing at you, they're not having their open eyes to yourself or your presentation, that means you have lost their attention. At that time, at least, you have to do something to attract the audience. Throw a question to the audience and ask something and get their feedback. And ask their comments. Okay, what do you think about these movies? What do you think about a greatest character of, say, Russell Peters or Amir Khan or Sridevi? You just talk something about movies, which I prefer the topic of movie. So attention grabbing is very important, and at that part, opening plays the biggest role, and then you move to the body. Again, you have a good opening. Maybe you can share a small story, or maybe you can share your own experience, which is unique to you. Maybe people start with stunning factors by Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Ernesto Che Guevara. They start with a statement made by them, and then from there onwards, they build up the story of their speech. But you have to make sure that your opening has a good relationship to the body. We call that transition, or precisely, it is the smoother transition. If you don't make a smooth transition, which means you talk about Ernesto Che Guevara, about his socialist developments, and all of a sudden you talk about solar power generation, it has no relationship at all. And at the end, you have to conclude it perfectly, giving the message, giving your final remarks, or else summarizing the content, what we have discussed about. And if you can link that beginning to that end, then people can remember that speech or presentation perfectly well. And we call that is a linking summary. Technically, there are different ways and means of people using their opening, body, and conclusion context, or compositions, to be precise. People go for bigger compositions of body if you have a long time. Say, for example, if you are a keynote speaker for about 2 hours, 1.5 hours, you can simply follow the method of 10% to 8% and 10%, which 10% is your opening composition, which may be the time you allocate for that, and 80% the content, and finally another 10%, very important 10% to conclude or the closure. Or if it is a shorter speech, if it is 5 to 7 minute speech or a 10-minute speech, the recommendation comes as 20%, the last one here, 20%, 80%, 60%, and 20%, which 20% allocation for opening, and 60% for the content, and 20% for conclusion. Speech මොනවා කිව්වත් අපි මොන ස්ටෝරි කියන හොඳම කන්ටෙන්ට්ස් හොඳ අපි කතා කරන අපි දැකලා තියෙන ඉතාමත්ම විද්වතුන් කියන්නේ පොතේ හැටියට ඉතාමත්ම පරිණත පුද්ගලයන් MSCs PhDs සහ වෙන MBA ගොඩාක් තියෙන කට්ටිය හැබැයි ස්ටේජ් එකට ආපු ගමන් මේ කට්ටිය මුලින්ම කන්වෙන්ෂනල් ස්පීකර් කෙනෙක් හැටියට පටන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම සහ එයාගේ ඕපනින් එකේදී එයාට ඔඩියන්ස් එක අල්ලගන්න බැරි වුණොත් හරියට කොච්චර රසවත් වුණත් කොච්චර වැදගත් වුණත් තමයි කන්ටෙන්ට් එක මිනිස්සු වෙන වැඩවලට යොමු වෙනවා. ඒක නැචරල් දෙයක්. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කියනවා මේ ස්පීකර් වැදගත් කියලා හිතනොත් විතරයි දැන් මිනිස්සු මේකට සමන් දෙන්නේ සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔවුන්ට තවත් වැඩ ගොඩාක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කට්ටිය වෙන බිසි ෂෙඩියුල්ස් වලින් විශේෂයෙන්ම හවසක වගේ ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඔෆිස් ඇරිලා ඉන්න වෙලාවක කට්ටිය උගක් ටයර්ඩ්. ඒස අපි කියන උගක් අමාරුම වෙලාවක් තමයි ස්පීචස් කරන්න after lunch. ඒ වගේ තමයි මිනිස්සු නිදිමතයි. ඒතර මොනවා හරි tools පාවිච්චි කරන්න වෙනවා මිනිස්සු මේ track කරන එක මම මුලින්ම මූවි එකක් ගැන කතා කරේ. ඔබ හිතුවොත් එහෙම ඔබේ ප්‍රියතම මූවි එක නැත්නම් ප්‍රියතම මූවි නැත්නම් අපි හිතමු ප්‍රියතම නළුවෝ ඉන්න මූවි ගත්තොත් එහෙම ෆිල්ම්ස් ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඒ හැම එකකම අපි කියන ක්ලයිමැක්ස් කියලා එක එක පොයින්ට්ස් තියෙනවා මිනිස්සු කවදාකවත් ඒකෙන් ඩිස්ට්‍රැක්ට් නොවෙන විදියට. හැබැයි ඩිස්ට්‍රැක්ට් වෙනවා නම් ඒ කියන්නේ ඒක ඇත්තට හොඳ මූවි එකක් නෙමෙයි. ඒකේ තියෙන ආර්ට් ඩිරෙක්ෂන්ස් ඇන්ඩ් ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස් හරියට ඒක ඩ්‍රයිව් කරනවා මිනිස්සු මූවි එක තුලම තියාගන්න. ඒකේ ස්ටෝරි ලයින් එක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒකේ නළුවගේ තියෙන ඇක්ෂන්ස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඔයාලා දකින්න ස්ටනින් ඉන්සිඩන්ට්ස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මේවා ඔස්සේ දිගටම කරගෙන යනවා මිනිස්සු මේක දිගට මේක දිහා බලන සමහර ලාවට ඔබ අපි කවුරුත් දන්නවා සමහර ඉස්සර කාලේ ටීවී අඩුවෙන් තියෙන කාලෙමත් රෑ 10ට 10 මාටත් ෆිල්ම්ස් පටන් ගන්න ඒක 12 1 වෙනකම් මිනිස්සු ෆිල්ම් බලනවා. නමුත් අපිට ඒ වගේම පාඩම් කරන්න කියලා කිව්වොත් අපි ඒකට කැමති නැහැ සහ අපිට ඒක කරන්න බෑ අපිට නින්ද යනවා. ඒත් සමග ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් එකම. ඒක නිසා any speech you start, any presentation you work with, you have to have a good content. At the same time, you have to have tools to keep the audience attracted. Some people say, okay, why you need this? People can simply say, oh no, why? It is not for me. So we are engineers, we are doctors, we are lawyers, we are expert in finance. So why do we need this public speaking? I don't need this. You can argue the fact that I don't need this. Many of senior people which I've made, they simply say, okay, Nalin, this is not for me. So just, okay, I'm pretty much okay with my design works. I'm pretty much okay with my project works. But ladies and gentlemen, talk the walk. I think you might have heard about walk the talk, but if you can talk the walk, which means if you can tell to your younger generation, your subordinates, that what you are doing right now, what your own experiences, which are unique. Maybe people know about Nelson Mandela's stories. Maybe people know about Mao Zedong's stories, but people don't know your own story. Maybe you might have some unique experience, some special stories, which could be helpful to others, to inspire them, to learn something. So if you're not a good narrator or orator or a good speaker, good presenter, definitely that part is to be missed out. So talk the walk and your unique experience to be shared, you have to have a good ability to present yourself. And particularly when it comes to leadership and decision making. So you have to be able to convince people and guide your team with your objectives. And if you're not a good, I don't think that you should be a native English speaker. This is applicable for both English and Sinhala and your own mother tongues as well. If you don't have a proper, planned, guided, structured speech or presentation, then you will not be convince your team. And particularly when it comes to global businesses, then right now we know that we have to work globally. This is a simple global village, and you and me are global citizens. So you have to negotiate with maybe our neighboring countries, India, Japan, China, with your businesses. At the same time, you have to represent sometimes country or your company, and you have to work with them maybe in abroad. On those practices, always, you have to have this ability. And I could remember the first day, distinguished Toastmasters Amin and Salim mentioned that what brings you here will not take you there. Let me repeat, what brings you here will not take you there, which means maybe your degree or maybe your educational qualifications might have brought you as an engineer or a professional player in this society, but to be the next level, to be at the next level, to lead at the next level, you definitely have to inculcate these abilities and skills. Particularly, I would like to highlight the word skill. Skill is something you can grow up within yourself by practicing. Those are not native talents. Public speaking is a skill. Presentation is a skill. So you can develop by practicing it. Finally, I should say it is inevitable because the future is a requirement to bring you to the next level. If you are a project engineer, and if you wish to be a project manager, then project director, and an owner of a company or an entrepreneur, and a CEO, CFO, or chairman of a company, or if you have your own teaching platforms, you are a general lecturer, then you need to be a keynote speaker in bigger audiences. You have to practice, and this is inevitable. And you cannot simply skip away that, okay, I'm okay right now. No, you're not okay. You may be okay, but you have to be brilliant when it comes to public speaking. Let's start very quickly with some of do's and don'ts. Quickly go back to my previous slide. I'm කෙටියෙන් කිව්වොත් එම් සමහරවිට මේක අපි කරන දෙයක් තමයි මේක මේ මට වැඩක් ඇති දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මම දැකලා තියෙන මොකක් ඔය සීනියර් ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල්ස්ලා මොනවා හරි දෙයක් ප්‍රසන්ට් කරන්න හරි මම දැක ආපු ගමන් ටක් ගාලා හොයලා ගන්නවා young junior engineer කෙනෙක් හරි කවුරු හරි පුතා මේක කරන්න. So it's not my business, just do it by yourself කියලා එයාව තල්ලු කරලා දානවා. ඔයාගේ බොස් ඇහුවොත් එහම හරි පොඩ්ඩක් බ්‍රීෆ් කරන්න කියලා කිව්වොත් එහම හරි පොඩ්ඩක් පස්සට කියලා තව කවුරු හරි දාලා වැඩේ කරනවා. negotiation meeting එකට ගිහිල්ලා කතා කරන්නේ තමන්ගේ company represent කරන්නේ තමන්ගේ own business එකක් product එකක් තමන්ගේ idea එකක් message එකක් එළියට දෙන්න බෑ. සහ තමන්ගේ own unique stories තියෙනවා. තමන්ටම ආවෙනික කතා තියෙනවා. තමන්ගේම experience තියෙනවා. ඒවා unique දේවල්. මම කලින් කිව්වා වගේ අපි Mao Zedong, Nelson Mandela ඔන සෝෂල් ගැන කතා කරාට ඒ කට්ටිය කතා famous වෙලා තියෙන ඒ කට්ටිය own orators ලා වෙච්ච නිසා ඒ තමන්ගේ කතාව ඒ කට්ටිය present කරපු නිසා. ඊට පස්සේ මම සියලු දෙනාට request කරන්නේ මේක වැළැක්විය හැකි දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. ඔබට යම් කිසි තැනකට දැන් ඉන්න තැන ඉඳන් ඔබට එලිවේට් වෙන බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන next level එකට අනිවාර්යෙන් public speaking, presentation skills, සහ මේ proper professional way of presenting කියන දේවල් ටික අනිවාර්යෙන් හදා ගන්න වෙනවා. ඒ වුණොත් තමයි ඔබ කියනවා different from the crowd. මේ team එකෙන් වෙනස් වෙලා ඔබ පේන්නේ. එතනට යන්න ඕන නම් අනිවාර්යෙන්ම ඔබට ඒක හදා ගන්න වෙනවා. ඒක කරන්න බැරි දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. මම නැවතත් කියනවා skills කියන වචනේ ගැන මම සිංහල ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් කිව්වා. skill එකක් කියන්නේ තමන්ට හදා ගන්න පුළුවන් සහ develop කරන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක්. එහෙම නැතුව ඒක අපි කියන්නේ උපතින්ම ආපු දෙයක් වෙන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. So for me, when I was graduated from University of Peradeniya, I was not that a good speaker, good presenter. I don't say that I'm a perfect presenter, but to become to this level, it took me some time. It took me my own hard works, and it took me some coaching and guidance, and it took me involvements. ඒක යෙදෙන්නම වෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් කවදාකවත් ප්‍රායෝගිකව මේක කරන්න බෑ. පොතෙන් බලලා අපි කියන්නේ පීනන්න පුරුදු වෙන්න බෑ කියලා. Swimming cannot be learned through books. You have to jump into the pool. You have to practice yourself. You have to have a proper coach to correct your techniques. So those are key important facts. Let me quickly move to do's and don'ts, because many of the times people think that, okay, I will go there and do something. Instead, I recommend and I urge you, you have to have a proper attire suited the presentation. The dress code, the way you dress up would judge you. As I mentioned, that the first impression or the way you start your speech or presentation could definitely matter. And the way you dress up, I don't think that you have to spend a whole lot of millions of billions of money to have the most expensive suits. You don't need Louis Vuitton. You don't need any other expensive attire, but what you have has to be properly matched with the requirement, and it has to be clean and clear to suit with the incident. Otherwise, people judge you at the beginning, and it's very difficult to change their mindset. And because the way they judge you at the beginning would matter at least at the very first 5-10 minutes of your speech. And it would take some time for them to change their mindset. And you have to prove it. And also that costs a lot of time. Sometimes that costs a lot. Stance on the stage. I've seen many people come on stage and go to the corner and just with their one single hand and have their hand crushed, talk to the audience. Stance, your positive stance with a smiled face, and have a good eye contact and touch with the people would matter a lot. We will discuss them later in our presentations, but in online platform, we have certain limitations, but what we recommend is the attire and stance is very important. At the same time, you have to use the stage. People on stage, sometimes people talk and walk on the stage. That is called a lion cage model, or a caged lion. The lion inside a cage, sometimes he moves and talks a lot, moves a lot. That's not recommended. You have to use the stage purposefully, and you can talk about one point somewhere and move to the other place and talk to the other point, move to the other corner, talk to the other point, and then finally come to the center and make your conclusions. Likewise, properly use the stage and touch the whole audience across the room is very important. Then people think that the body language, or as I mentioned about the eye contact, would not matter, because I've seen many of the speakers come to stage and have their presentations beside, and they look at the presentation and talk to sometimes to walls, sometimes to the floor, and sometimes to the ceiling. They don't talk to the audience, which is very important. That is called the engagement, with the audience engagement, and otherwise it is distracted. And you have to use the body language, your hand gestures, explain it. And the body language, or the body, speaks a lot, rather than simply having a rigid personality. Instead, you can have a good, flexible gestures, we call it body language. It matters a lot. Most of the people come on stage and say, which shows that he has not practiced well, he has not rehearsed well, and he has a huge issue with his language flow. And ladies and gentlemen, being we are not the native English speakers, We have to practice this a lot. I'll tell you some of few tips which I used to do, and I'm still doing it. And to avoid these ahs and ums, which definitely makes your speech completely a nuisance, you have to practice yourself. And the crutch words, you might have seen people come on stage and say, I mean, every word starts with I mean. And if you go with this, sometimes it's Black American, they use, those are called crutch words. And even in many places, I have seen people using actually as crutch word. It's actually, for everything, yes, actually. So those are crutch words which you have to forcefully eliminate them, otherwise your speech become a real scrap of debris, I could say. Because to remove them, then your speech become clean and clear, and your message is crystal clear. And vocal varieties. Most of the times, I found my speeches are monotonous. We call that same tone, same speed. But you have to raise your voice in certain areas. At the same time, you lower your voice, reduce your voice, and give audience to think it. And those are called vocal varieties. And those tools definitely be helpful. And finally, you have to have some humor here and there, because I believe that humor is something which is very important when it comes to speech, and otherwise the speech becomes so boring. And if you can properly incorporate some, I can say, professional humor, and people would laugh at the same time, people would refresh their minds at the same time, try to inline those humor to your career contents. Otherwise, you don't just talk about some jokes which is not relevant at all. And especially, I would like to highlight these 4 points: politics, sex, and religion, which are highly sensitive to people, different types of people. So while you're using, what I recommend is try not to use, but if you are compelled to use them, and do it professionally, make sure that you will not hurt others. At the same time, your speech or you yourself, your dignity itself, sometimes will definitely be not recognized properly if you use them in a wrong way. මම සිංහලෙන් තාම කෙටියෙන් කිව්වොත් එහෙම ඔබ අඳින පළඳින තැන සහ ස්ටේජ් එක භාවිත කරන තැන සහ ඔබේ ස්ටේජ් එකේ ඔබ දක්නට ලැබෙන ක්‍රමවේදය පවා ඉතාමත් වැදගත්. මුලින් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අතහැරලා දාන දෙයක්. කොච්චර කිව්වද මම කට්ටිය ඔඩියන්ස් එක දිහා බලලා ටයි එකක් දාන්නේ නැහැ, ඇඳුමක් අඳින්නේ නැහැ. මම කියන්නේ ඒකට ලක්ෂ ගණන් වියදම් කරන්න ඕන කියලා. නමුත් තමන් ගාව තියෙන ඇඳුම් සහ ගැළපෙන විදිහට ඒවා ඇඳගෙන ඔඩියන්ස් එකට යන්න. ඒකෙන් කාරණා දෙකක් වෙනවා. There could be two key important points. Number one, you feel confident. ඔබ ඔයාගෙන හොඳ confident එකකින් වැඩේට බහින්න. Number two, you respect to the audience by having a good attire, professional attire. එකෙන් අනිත් දේ ගම්ම වෙන දේ තමයි ඔබ audience එකට ගරු කිරීමක් හැටියට තමයි මේ පිළිවෙලට ඇඳගෙන සහ මේ ගරු කිරීම හැටියට තමයි පැමිණෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා ඒ කාරණා දෙකම ඉතාම වැදගත්. තමන් පැතිගේ සහ ප්‍රසන්ට් එකේ හැටියට යනවා. ඊට අමතරව මම මේ කතා කරේ body language, eye contacts, arms, ඒවට කියනවා crutch words කියලා කියනවා. ඊට අමතරව vocal variety කරන්න පුළුවන් කෙනෙක් හොඳට ශබ්දයේ අඩු වැඩි කරලා වේගය වැඩි කරලා කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. Tone speech, and there are different ways of doing it. And at the same time, finally, පොඩක් අපි කියනවා jokes නෙමෙයි, humor, හාස්‍ය උපදවන්න පුළුවන් නම් විහිළුකාරයෙක් වෙන නෙමෙයි ස්ටේජ් එකේ. නමුත් ඔබට යම්කිසි ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් විදියට වෘත්තීය වශයෙන් පොඩි හාස්‍යයක් උපදවන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒක හොඳ career way point එකක් වෙනවා, especially when it comes to speeches like we called lunch after speeches. So the speeches just after the lunch, which is the most critical, and the best talented people do those speeches because people feel sleepy and it's very difficult to keep them engaged and agile. In that cases, you have to do some humor particularly, but when it comes to humor, you have to be very careful with the sensitive subjects of politics, sex, and religion. Hari. Movie number one. අපි පළවෙනි ෆිල්ම් එක බලමු. කටි ready කියලා හිතනවා මම. I believe that everybody is ready to watch the movie. Who has seen this movie or watched this movie? Arm Bolt. By the name it suggests, and it's quite a self-explanatory movie. It is about Usain Bolt. Sanjay, can they show their thumbs up? No. That's still fine. I believe most of you know this personality. And this movie itself is not autobiography. I cannot say it's an autobiography, but it's a documentary movie which the real Usain Bolt portrays his character, and the coach and his friends, 2 friends and a girlfriend as well, starring that movie. It's a documentary movie. Why I selected this is, I told you at the beginning, you have to do eye contact, you have to do body language, you have to have a good language. Simply, it is quite easy for me to tell you that you have to do these things, but the point is, how do you have it? There's quite a famous story about this, not movie, in fact, this is about Usain Bolt. People say he's a triple crown gold medalist, which means he has won 3 gold medals in a row in 3 Olympics. Altogether 9 gold medals. And the famous story behind is, to have that 9 gold medals, he has run on the track for less than 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes. You agree with me? You should. Let me prove that point. 100 meters, generally it's around 10 seconds. 200 meters, another 20 seconds. And say 400 meters, another 40 seconds. Altogether, you have 10, 20, 40, 1 minute and 10 seconds in 1 Olympic. And if it can, when it comes to 3 Olympics, it's totally less than 5 minutes. But the point behind is, yes, 5 minutes of running had earned him 9 gold medals, but the work behind, the hard work behind, for maybe 12 years of, particularly with the 3 Olympics, and before that, maybe another 5, 6 years altogether, around 20 years of hard work has paid off within the 5 minutes time. Maybe a speaker comes on stage. Let me come to the speaker's point. And he comes on stage and make a 5 minutes, 10-minute speech, and you would be stunned. Okay, so what a brilliant speaker. Just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, he made a brilliant speech. But true that he was on the stage for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but the works behind the stage, maybe he has learned a lot of languages and he has put a lot of efforts to become to that level, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. For you to tell me about myself, I'm in Toastmasters right now for last 8 years. I'm with the 9th year right now. Again, I'm not saying I may not be the best speaker, but to become to this level, it took me about 8 years. So you can see movie stars, you can see good cricketers, you can see good athletes, you can see brilliant singers, but think of that they are hard works, and that's what paid off. You cannot simply become a star within an overnight. You have to work for it. Avoid fast food. You might think that this is another mistake. It looks as if, but my favorite part of this movie is this. At the very end of the movie, one of a journalist shoot a question to Usain Bolt. Usain, what you have done first once you declare your retirement? What you have done first after you declare your retirement? And Usain Bolt's answer was, for me, surprising. He said that I went to a junk food store and had a huge hamburger, a fast food. You know what? He was not allowed to eat fast food for the last 12 to 15 years. He was not allowed to eat fast food for the last 12 to 15 years by his coach, his nutritionist, in fact. Which means he has his self-discipline. To succeed yourself, you have to have your self-discipline. You can cheat other people. It would have impact or sometimes may not, by the look of it, but you cannot cheat yourself. If you have a discipline, or if you promise yourself, I will take at least 10 minutes of English study, I will take a day to study at least new 5 words, 5 English words, or I will take some rehearsals in front of a mirror or in front of a webcam, or I'll prepare myself, I will write a script to my speech next time. So that is self-discipline. You have to do it by yourself. If you cheat yourself, the repercussions are quite obvious. Finally, you might have seen that Usain Bolt showing that he's passionate about his accomplishment. Once he is done with a race, he shows the passion, because you have to enjoy what you do. And I'm enjoying this presentation. I love this presentation. I love to share my experience, and I love to talk to these 300-400 people at once. Online platform. I know that when it published in the YouTube, and it could reach to over 2,000-3,000 views. So I love this. Therefore, I'm passionate about this. And whatever you love, please try to passionate and do it by yourself. And don't do something which was pushed by your parents, which was pushed by your friends. Maybe your neighbor does it. That may not be the reason for you to do it. You do something which is passionate, which is helpful for you, for your improvement. කෙටියෙන්ම කිව්වොත් මේ මූවි එක ආම් බෝල්ට් කියන මූවි එක මේක ඩොකියුමන්ටරි මූවි එක මේක ඔටෝබයෝග්‍රැෆි එකකුත් නෙමෙයි උසේන් බෝල්ට් කියන චරිතයම තමයි මේ මූවි එකේ තියෙන්නේ එච්චර ලොකු කාලයක් යන එකක් නෙමෙයි මම රෙකමන්ඩ් කරනවා ඔසියල් කරන්න බලන්න මේක මම ඊටම කෙටියෙන් කිව්වේ උසේන් බෝල්ට් විනාඩි 5කටත් වඩා අඩු කාලයක් තමයි ට්‍රැක් එකේ දුවලා තියෙන්නේ මෙයාගේ ගෝල්ඩ් මෙඩල්ස් 9ම ගන්න හරියට ගණනක් කරලා බැලුවොත් මීටර් 100 ගැන තප්පර 10ක් විතර දෙයක් 200 ගැන 20ක් 400 ගැන අපිට 44ක් වගේ දෙයක් වුණොත් එහෙම එකතු කරලා ගත්තත් විනාඩියයි something ගණනක් කියන. ඒතර විනාඩි 3යි තප්පර 30ක් 40ක් ඇතුළත මෙයා සියලුම ගෝල්ඩ් මෙඩල්ස් වලට අවශ්‍ය වෙන දුවලා තියෙන ට්‍රැක් එකේ. නමුත් ට්‍රැක් එකෙන් එළිය කරපු දේවල් තමයි වැදගත්. ඒකයි මම කිව්වේ ස්පීච් එකක් දැක්කත් ඔබට මේ විනාඩි 2 3 විනාඩි 5 10 කීනෝට් ස්පීච් එක පැයක් ඇතුළත ඔබ බැලුවොත් ඔබට හිතෙන්නේ මේක හොඳ ස්පීච් එකක්, හොඳ ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් එකක්. ඒ වුණාට ඔබ බලන්න ඕන මේක පිටිපස්සේ මෙයා කොච්චර මේකට වැඩ කරලා තියෙනවද, කොච්චර මේකට මහන්සි වෙලා තියෙනවද, ස්ක්‍රිප්ට් ලියලා, රිහර්සල් කරලා, කටින් උපදේශ අරගෙන කොච්චර දේවල් මේකට කරලා තියෙනවද සහ මේකේ ලැන්ග්වේජ් ස්කිල්ස් එක මෙයා හදාගන්න කොච්චර මහන්සි වෙලා තියෙනවද, කොච්චර කැපකිරීමක් කරලා තියෙනවද කියන එක තමයි very important. මම කිව්වේ self discipline කියන එක very important. අනිත් මිනිස්සු කොච්චර රවට්ටුවත් තමන්ව තමන් රවට්ට ගන්න එපා. ඒක තමයි self discipline කියන්නේ. සහ තමන් කරන දේ ආශාවෙන් සහ ආදරයෙන් කරන්න. එහෙම වුණොත් මම හිතනවා ඒක අපිට enjoy කරන්න පුළුවන්. This topic about the language skills, we will talk in a separate segment itself. But I needed to highlight a few areas which, when it comes to delivery techniques, because sometimes people go on and stage say something, and that thing, this thing, some people, especially when it comes to informational or technical presentation, and this doesn't carry any weight at all. You have to be specific. Your speech has to be specific, and instead of saying that thing, this thing, or some people, you have to say that HP laptop placed on the table, this bus going through Colombo to Kandy, those people who resides in Kaduela area nearby the highway were impacted by flood. Your statements has to be specific, otherwise people get some vague messages, especially when it comes to language usage. Be specific when you do these presentations. And the jargon, sometimes people think telling the most difficult technical words whom people cannot understand at all would judge you as a good speaker, which would never happen. Because our objective of having a speech or a presentation is to convey a message or give a message or inspire the audience with your speech. If they cannot understand, obviously it will not work. Maybe when it comes to technical presentations, particularly, you have to use some technical jargons that is quite unavoidable, I can say. But the point here is, though you use those technical jargons, try to simplify, try to make it quite easy to understand to the audience, especially if it is a technical audience. That could be okay if you present your technical thesis or a research outcome. That could be, okay, the audience is able to digest those content. But if you talk to a different audience, that's why we call as a thumb rule, you have to judge, or you have to have a good idea about the audience first. Don't talk your every speech to every audience. It will not work. There could be some different people from different backgrounds. There may be some common people. There could be some students. There could be some scholars. There could be some people who are from military forces. So you have to understand first the demography, and it should match with the demography. Instead, you might use the best or the highest accolades of technical jargons, which you think you're a good speaker. And people think that, okay, they talk something, but no, the message was not conveyed. Finally, people again think that having most complex sentences, or having said that I was there, then I claimed there, and then I moved there, and then people came there, conjuncting everything. And finally, you yourself forget that where I started. Therefore, language usage is very important, and try to be simple as possible. The simplest sentence make it clear, and the audience could easily grab. And between, have some pauses, have some eye contact. Let audience to have your speech to be digested. That is very important. Finally, there are people called, in my gauge, I refer them as beautiful people sometimes, because these people use beautiful is a word, keyword for everything. You see a girl, say, oh, beautiful girl. You see a car, you say, beautiful car. You see a house, beautiful house. You find a book, oh, beautiful book. Beautiful food. So to have, we call the vivid or different superlative forms, especially vivid words, appropriate. Again, it has to be appropriate. Could be the best way to make your audience interested with your speech. Instead of saying the same word for everything, try it differently. You can say a fantastic cricket player, a beautiful car, say a brilliant piece of work, stupendous animation, an amazing personality, stunning piece of driving, and a gorgeous lady, a charming boy, a dazzling sari. So your vivid words carry a rich value to your speech, instead of saying everything with the same adjective. And the worst part, I've seen many in South Asian perspective, people say very beautiful, and if you need to be much more beautiful, you say very, very beautiful. And sometimes people say very, very, very beautiful. It doesn't carry that. You put very, very in between, and having this longest way of saying very beautiful, it is not the most way. You will call it superlative forms. You can say most beautiful, the most beautiful river, the most beautiful waterfall I have ever watched, ever seen. One of the best players in cricket. Again, you have to try with different superlative forms. මම හිතම් කිව්වොත් එහෙම මේක ගැන කතා කරන දේවල් ස්පෙસિෆික් වෙන්න ඕන. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි අරයා මෙයා අර කට්ටිය මේ කට්ටිය කියන වචන even in Sinhala is also it doesn't make sense. ඒකම තමයි අපි තාක්ෂණිකව සහ වෙනත් තාම බරපතල වචන දාලා කතා කරන එක අපි හිතනවා හොඳ ස්පීකර් කෙනෙක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒකෙන් අපි අර බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන මෙසේජ් එක ඔඩියන්ස් එකට යන්නේ නැත්නම් මේ මොනවා කතා කරත් වැඩක් නැහැ. අපි අර බරපතල දේවල් කතා කරපුවම මේ මිනිස්සු මොනවද දේවල් ටික කිව්වා කියලා විතරයි ඔළුවේ තියෙන්නේ. They don't take it with a good spirit. Finally, simple වචන කතා කරන්න සහ simple වාක්‍ය කතා කරන තරමට තමයි තමන්ගේ කතාවලත් ලේසි, තමන්ටත් ලේසි කොතනින්ද පටන් ගත්තේ කොතනද ඉවර කරේ. ඊට පස්සේ ඊළඟ ස්ටෙප් එකට යනවා. නැත්නම් මෙතන මෙහෙම කරලා මෙහෙම යන ගමන් අතනින් දැක්ක මෙයා මේක දකින්න ගමන් කන්ජන්ක්ෂන් ගොඩාක් දාගෙන ගිහින් අන්තිමට තමන්ටත් මතක නෑ කොහෙන්ද මම මේ වාක්‍ය පටන් ගත්තේ කියලා. It's very important to be simple මම අන්තිමට කිව්ව දේ තමයි මේ appropriate adjectives සහ adverbs අපි කතා කරන නාමපද සහ ක්‍රියාපද වර්ණවත් කරන දාන වචන විවිධාකාරයේ වචන පුරුදු වෙනවා. අඩුම ගානේ දවසට එකක් දෙකක්වත් පාවිච්චි කරන ඒ වචන කියන ගමන් ඒ වචනෙට මොකක්ද adjective එක මොකක්ද adverb එක use කරන්න පුළුවන් කියන දේවල් ගැන ඉගෙන ගන්න දවසට අඩුම ගානේ වචනයක් දෙකක්වත් අලුත් දේවල්. එහෙම නැතුනොත් වෙන්නේ එකම වචනේ තමයි මම අර කිව්වා වගේ beautiful කියන එක තමයි හැම එකටම කියන්නේ. It becomes boring and it doesn't carry a rich value to a speech. අපි කියන කතාව හරවත් වෙන සහ බරවත් වෙන ලස්සන වෙන්නේ තමන්ගේ ලස්සන වචන පාවිච්චි කරලා. නැවතත් අර උඩ පොයින්ට් එකේ තියෙන විදිහට ජාගන්ස් ගොඩාක් පාවිච්චි කරන්න කියන එක නෙමෙයි කියන්නේ. නමුත් ලස්සන විවිධ වචන පාවිච්චි කරන තරමට තමයි කතා කරන දෙයක් එහෙම නැත්නම් ලියන දෙයක් ප්‍රසන්ට් කරන ඕන දෙයක් ලස්සන වෙන්නේ. Okay. I have few of some very important delivery techniques which I love to share with you. Number one is the pronunciation. I took this pronunciation tip for you to understand, particularly engineers. Most of the engineers, they say, I am an engineer. Engineer, start with I. So that is the wrong pronunciation. Because when it comes to delivery of a speech, again, I'm not referring to that native English accent, we call that Suddhas accent. No, it is not required. But again, you don't need to go to these elocution classes, but listen carefully and get the proper pronunciation. And if you are in trouble with pronunciation, my recommendation, my tip for you, just simply go to Google and see here, I've put a screenshot here. Put Google and type engineer meaning. So if you need to find any meanings, if it's a new word, or if it's difficult to pronounce, type their meaning in Google. So they end up with a nice set of meanings, synonyms, usage of it, and the most important part here for me, to go through this symbol of a small speaker. Hope you all can see. Just click it and it gives a good voice message how to pronounce it. So that is very important. Pronunciation is very important. And if you are in trouble, you can simply type. There are different ways and means of doing it. But my way, I simply go to Google and type it, the meaning. If it is a different meaning, I just type, okay, pronunciation meaning. Type it and meaning, then it comes with a good dictionary outcome with meaning, synonyms, and how to use it, sometimes antonyms and anonyms, and then you can go, especially with this speaker notification, just the symbol there, and click it. You will get a proper pronunciation. So that's my tip for you for the day. And there are some other keywords: career, successful, message. Those are wrong pronunciation. They have to be properly pronounced as career. Career is a different word. Successful is wrong pronunciation. Again, it has to be successful. And message, it has to be message. And I have put here few words starting with A, because many people think, especially our South Asian people, by looking at A, it has to be A. Attendance, avoid, appeal, alarm, they all are wrong pronunciation here. Precisely, it has to be attendance, avoid, appeal, and alarm. Replace every A by A. Just assume that it is you, attendance, avoid, appeal, alarm. So that's how it has to be. And my second tip for you, I have my kids into elocution classes and I get their support. Don't be afraid or don't be shy to get support from somebody. Doesn't matter how old he or she is, but I get support from them. And if you need to do it secretly, go to Google, type it, the meaning, and click that speaker. You'll get the proper pronunciation. And most important part is you pronounce it yourself. Try pronounce it, repeat it, try pronunciation. While you're driving alone, try to pronounce some good English and practice yourself and execute them in your next presentation or speeches. Then we call the contractions in language. We have another segment for this, but what I need, the delivery techniques particularly are very important, because people go along with this writing type of English, the professional letter writing scripts, they talk on stage. For example, I would like, should be I'd like. I will bring, should be I'll bring. And finally, it is going to be raining. So once you talk on stage, it is going to be raining. It should be, it's gonna be raining. It's gonna be raining. So the way you pronounce, the way you speak out is quite different. I could remember back in my childhood, there were English classes called spoken English. And I had my own argument that, okay, the written English and spoken English are different. There are a few differences. And they call it, it's an energy saving mode, and they are not reading out everything, especially this native English speaker people. And you have to get those things to become a good speaker. Finally, people think that, okay, faster speeches are the good speeches. Once you have a good face and go fast and fast, people get nothing. People have no time to understand. And we call that digestion is very difficult for them. It's a point by point, after point and point. So you pile up a lot of messages, a lot of points, a lot of technical jargons over and over. People find it very difficult. So think of it, where I have to be fast speaking and where I have to be slow. And finally, where you have to put your pauses, we call it stops somewhere. Especially once you are in transition from one point to another point. Have a pause. Make a small bit of silence, 3-4 seconds. And if you need to give chance to audience to think a little bit, if you need to build up a curiosity, when I was in the hospital, then all of a sudden I saw one person coming in. Pause for a while. Now the audience need to know that who that person is. Likewise, when you make a speech, and if you need to give them or emphasize or build up the curiosity, you need to have pauses. Even silence make much effective rather than talking something unnecessary, or else put it with some crutch words. Just keep yourself silent for a while. Look at the audience. Get engaged with them still. Smile at them. Show some emotions to audience appropriately with your speech. That could be highly helpful. Let's move into 2 more movies. Have you watched this movie? 2 movies. Number 1 called English Winglish, starring late Sridevi. Another famous, again based on a true story. This is King's Speech, King George VI. Anybody, you have watched these movies? First one, for your information, I'm sure that many of you have watched, and if you have not, Sridevi portrays a character of a conventional Indian woman, and she had to go to USA for a special event that was a wedding of his relative. In between that journey and at the ceremony itself at the wedding or before that wedding, how she handles her language skills or how she learned those essential language skills is a key behind this movie. And that was quite a good example for people, especially people would say, I didn't school at an elite school. I was studied in a rural village. In my school, there were no English teachers. So people who has that skills, I believe that this movie gives a brilliant message. If you have the real dedication, if you have the real enthusiasm, and if you are really committed, right now, you cannot simply say that I don't have facilities. I don't have anybody to teach me English. I didn't have good teachers back in my schools. I didn't attend to a good English medium or elite school in the city. No, you cannot have those excuses. So this is a brilliant piece of movie. I recommend you to watch. And the way she encountered issues, at the same time, how she managed those issues, and ultimately she become, I don't think that she became a good speaker, but she managed within that 1 to 2 months time. The second movie is about a real king, King George VI, and finally he crowned as King George VI at the World War time. And he's a stammer, but with the help of his wife, at the same time with the help of a good coach of one of his friends, not in fact his friend, but they become friends ultimately. And with the help of this coaching, practices, dedication, even being a king, it took a fair amount of time and fair amount of dedication, and finally he became a fairly good speaker. One statement of that movie I could like to highlight, that once King George VI said, "I'm a king without a voice. I'm a king without a voice." So that's the bottom line. He goes there, and then ultimately how he practiced, how he put his effort. I'm sure that that would definitely inspire you if you think that I don't have enough facilities, I don't have enough time, I'm so busy with my works, I'm busy nowadays with my masters. Those are the excuses people have. And I think you have to watch this movie if you have not. If you have watched, watch for the second time. That could definitely be helpful. It ends with accomplishment. And the accomplishments comes with maybe many failures. But the point here is that if you can sustain, if you can stay strong with your failures, and the accomplishment is quite positive. ඉතම කෙටියෙන් කිව්වොත් මේ අපි මූවි දෙකක් ගැන කතා කරනවා. එකක් ඉංග්‍රීසි කියන මූවි එක. මේක ඉතම ප්‍රසිද්ධ මූවි එකක්. ශ්‍රීදේවිය අතන ශ්‍රීදේවි දැන් නැහැ. ශ්‍රීදේවිගේ මම හිතන්නේ හොඳම මූවි එකක් අන්තිම කාලේ කරපු. මේක තියෙන කන්වෙන්ෂනල් කියන ගමේ හැදිච්ච වෙරිච්ච ඉන්දියන් කාන්තාවක්. එයාගේ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය කාරණයක් කියන්නේ වෙඩින් එකක් ෆන්ක්ෂන් එකකට එයාගේ ෆැමිලි ये බලන්න ඇමරිකාවට ගිය වෙලාවක ඒ අතරමඟ සහ ඒ කාලය තුලදී ඇයට සිදුවෙන ප්‍රශ්න සහේදී ඒ කොහොමද ලැන්ග්වේජ් එක ඉගෙන ගන්න මහන්සි වෙන හැටි කෝච් එක ගැන හිතුවත් දන්නේ නැහැ යා ඊට පස්සේ ආ කොහොමද ඒක ඕවර්කම් කරන එක ද ක්ලාසික් එක්සැම්පල් එකක් ස්පෙෂලි අපේ කට්ටිය කියනවා මම ගම්පල තුලින් ආවේ මගේ ඉස්කෝලේ ගුරුවරයෙක් හිටියේ නේ හරියට මම ගියේ කොළඹ හොඳ ඉස්කෝලේකට නෙමෙයි මම ගියේ ඔය වගේ එක්ස්කියුසස් කියන හුඟක් කට්ටියට මම හිතනවා මේක හොඳ එක්සැම්පල් එකක් ඒත් එක්කම ඒ කාලය ඇතුළත සහ එතනින් පස්සේ මේක ඉවර වෙන්නේ මූවි එකේ මෙයා අපි කියනවා වෙඩින් එකේ ටෝස්ට් එකත් මෙයාම තමයි දෙන්නේ ඒ මට්ටමට මෙයා ඩෙවලොප් වෙනවා within the shorter period over 3 months time so it's a classic example දෙවෙනි කාරණේ දෙවෙනි මූවි එක මෙතන කිං ස්පීච් කියන එක මේක ඇත්තම සත්‍ය කතාවක් ඇසුරෙන් හැදිච්ච මූවි එකක් දෙවන ලෝක යුද්ධ කාලේ එංගලන්තේ රජ වෙච්ච එක්කෙනා කිං ජෝර්ජ් the 6th හයවෙනි ජෝර්ජ් රජුරුව ගැන. එතන මේ කතාවෙත් තියෙන වෙනත් කලන්දර ගොඩක් එක පිටිපස්සේ නමුත් මම කිව්වේ he's a stammer. කියන්නේ ආයතනම ගොතයි. එයාට කතා කරන්න බෑ. එයාට අපි කියන speech impediments. He had a speech impediment. කතා කරන්න බැරි කතා කරන්න බැහැ නැත්නම් මේ කතා කරද්දී එයාට ගොත ගැහෙනවා. ඒ විදිහට තැනකදී මම අර කාරණා කිව්වා වගේ එක තැනකදී මෙයා කියන මම රජෙක් වුණාට මම voice එකක් නැති රජෙක්. සද්දයක් නැති රජෙක්. කියන්නේ එහෙම වුණාම එයාටම commanding රජෙක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. රජෙක් කියන්නේ එංගලන්තේ පමණක් නෙමෙයි විශේෂයෙන් emperor to the whole world and they were having the whole world under them. Commonwealth කියන එක කතා කරන පොදු රාජ්‍ය මණ්ඩලයේ මේ රටවල් සියල්ලම රජු හැටියට ඉන්නකොට ඔවුන්ට හරි voice එක නැත්තම් රටක් සහ රාජ්‍යයක් පාලනය කිරීමේදී ඉතාමත් ප්‍රශ්න. නමුත් මේදී මොහොයි බිරිඳ සහ මෙතන අපි දකින මේ අනිත් උදව්වට එන කෙනා ස්පීච් තෙරපිස්ට් කෙනෙක් අතර මේ ටෙක්නිකල් ඒ දෙන්නගේ උදව්ව ඇතුව මෙයා කොහොමද අන්තිමට මේක මැනේජ් කරගන්නේ කියන එක තමයි මේ ස්පීච් එකේ තියෙන ස්ටෝරි එකේ තියෙන ෆිල්ම් එකේ ඉතාමත් හොඳ ෆිල්ම් එකක් බලන්න රෙකමන්ඩ් කරන්න හොඳ ෆිල්ම් එකක්. ඒතර මම කිය සත්‍ය කතාවක් ඇසුරෙන් හරිච්ච ෆිල්ම් එකක්. ඒක නිසා ඒක එකත් හොඳ උදාහරණයක් අර අපි සමහර කියනෝනේ මට පොඩි ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා මගේ voice එක එන්නේ හරියට I cannot speak loudly මම කියුවේ මේ ඔක්කොම skills හදාගන්න ඕනතරම් ක්‍රමවේද තියෙනවා එක එක tools පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් මේවා skills එක කෙරෙන්න ගන්න බෑ කවදාකවත් මේ අද කාලේ ඒවා කවුරුත් පිළිගන්නේ නැහැ එන් කිව්වා කියලා ඔයාලට විශේෂ සැලකිල්ලක් හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ especially when it comes to international arena you can simply say I'm from Sri Lanka I am from a rural village of Sri Lanka. No, that's not an excuse. So, okay, then you do something by your own. Don't come to these elite groups. And if you need to bring yourself to that next level, if you are eager to make yourself at the next level, so you have to work hard. මගේ දේශනේ මගේ presentation මම ඊළඟ කොටසට එන්නම්. අපි කතා කරන්නේ visual aids පාවිච්චි කරන එක සහ මේ presentation එක හරියට කරන්න. Because now I'm moving into my second segment of the presentation, which is good presentation and a bad presentation. Give me a second. Okay, into a good presentation and a bad presentation. As I mentioned earlier, there are some people come on stage and by the look of their profile, we think, okay, this person will do brilliant on stage. These people will definitely make some stunning presentations on stage. That's what we expect from them. I personally have that experience especially back in IESL, instead of engineers, the auditorium itself, they come with a brilliant profile and come on stage and do some, in my words, it's some blunders. So let's see how to make a presentation effective and how to make a presentation good or bad. Let me try with one presentation. Today we are going to talk about Sri Lankan agriculture sector and their contribution. And agriculture sector contributes, say, about 7% to the national GDP, and the livestock sector account for 0.9%. And over 25% of Sri Lankans are employed in the agriculture sectors, although Sri Lanka is a fertile tropic land. And okay, this is how agriculture and okay, then we'll move into the next segment of fisheries sector and how this GDP and the fisheries industry is a key sector in Sri Lanka, which is capable of making a greater contribution, blah, 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 blah. And on, that's how people finish their presentation, and then now they put the presentation end. Now I need some support from you. Starting from this slide, the way he or she comes on stage, and see if I have the slides behind me, sometimes people have the back screen and they have this slide. I should say some funky animations and different type of fonts here and there, and it is filled with words which is supposed to be a visual aid, which means you have a speech, you are a presenter, you have to make your speech, at the same time you have a visual aid behind you. There is an aid to help you out. But what you do, they go on stage and look at the screen behind and read word by word of what is content. And that's what mostly people do as presentations. And if I am to talk about two segments in presentation, you have two basic segments. One is the presentation, the other one is the presenter. When it comes to presentation, this is one of the worst presentations. So why it is bad or one of the worst? There are many reasons. Number one, you can say different types of fonts and different unmatching colors here and there, and the contents are filled and jumped here. So the flooded contents would make you so complex. And finally, you have an image with a watermark, number one, and the image itself is not clear. And if you go closer to the image, it shows a different hat, which is not a Sri Lankan image. Obviously, it is from Vietnam or Far East farm. So your slide is filled with content, flooded with content to be precise, and you have different colors and different fonts and different, I can say, some animations which are not again professionals. And when I move to the next slide, and it has a different color altogether, and I have a cartoon type of image, and another funky animation going with the content, quite difficult to read out, and you have to read everything. So those are not good presentations, ladies and gentlemen. To use the visual aids, as I mentioned, let's split into two, presenter and the presentation. If I'm to talk about a little bit about the presentation, number one, try to have some free spaces in your slide. As I mentioned, this is a visual aid. This is not the whole presentation. The presentation should be done by the presenter. You yourself have to talk to the audience. You can put everything on slide and please simply go to the slide and read it out. No, you have to have good slide as a visual aid, as I mentioned. So it has to have some free space. You have to use some basic fonts. Don't try with different type of fonts. Sometimes you are putting different 3, 4, 5 types of fonts, and that same soft copy put into your laptop in the auditorium, and you end up with having no fonts and sometimes scattered fonts here and there. Try with very basic fonts, quite familiar to your eyes, Arial or Calibri or basic key fonts. Then the same template, there should be a professional same flow of templates, and you have some different colors, and all of a sudden you change yourself and you use some cartoon image instead of a still photograph. Try with the same template, and it has to have some quality, clear images. You can't use those with the watermarks, and technically you cannot use even the photographs which these royalty values, which has something all right reserved. You're not allowed to use unless you put their source where you have extracted. Again, the key here is the quality images. Finally, if you are to use graphics, there could be some pie charts, so there could be some bar charts, some donut charts, different type of charts. Make sure that those are clear enough for the audience to understand it, and don't make audience much more complex putting another graphic. So the purpose of graphic, or the whole purpose of this visual aid, is to make audience clear about what you're talking. So have to have clear graphics. In summary, free spaces, basic fonts, same template, quality images, and the clear graphics. Let's talk about a little bit about this presenter. As I showed you earlier, as I tried to portray and try to go to the screen and read out, or I'll go back to the screen behind you and read it out. This is called word-to-word reading. It is not representative. It is not presenting at all. And you have to show yourself front-ended, and don't show your backside to the audience by looking at the screen always. No, you have to front-side it. You have to talk to the audience. When it comes to a digital or a virtual platform, you have to talk to the audience mostly. See that now I'm looking at the camera. To have a proper eye contact, you have to precisely look at the camera, or else the areas surrounded by the camera. Even looking at the screen would distract yourself. And if you go look down or note your notes or something, if you have on your table, again, you distract the audience. Try to talk as much as to the camera. That has a good eye contact. And a physical presentation or physical meeting, you have to talk to the audience, split the audience into 2, 3 segments or 4 segments technically, and talk to the audience, have that proper eye contact. Finally, this confidence gesture is very important. Don't stay with one leg, one-ended, have the podium and sleep on the podium. No, those are not recommended, not professional way of doing it. You have to have a confident gesture. And finally, the audience engagement is very important. As I mentioned, that eye contact, apart from that, if you can shoot some questions, get some feedback with the audience, because this presentation is all about get audience engagement. True that you have a visual aid behind you on the screen. Sometimes there are certain tools where you can switch off the presentation. I'll show you how to do it. And you can get the full attention to yourself. Otherwise, people look at the screen behind you. Just switch on for a while, switch off for a while. then get the attention to you. Talk to the audience. So that's how a proper presentation to be done. Finally, the cardinal rule behind everything, every speech, every presentation. Rehearsals are very important, and you have to do rehearsals, otherwise you will definitely be failed. Let me try the same presentation. The agriculture and fisheries presentation, if you could remember that there were a few slides and there were a few images. Now I'm going to put it into one slide and make it quite clear. Let me try. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to talk about agriculture and fisheries sector of Sri Lanka in terms of population and the GDP contribution. If you look at this first graphic in my left side, it is about the population and their involvement. Having seen the graphic itself, it's quite obvious that 25% of population and 10% of population consecutive, like farmers and fishermen respectively. In contrast, you can find their contribution to the GDP. It is quite obvious and bit of pathetic situation here. It's 7% and 1% respectively. They contribute to the GDP. That's all. With these clear graphics, with this clear presentation, I've presented everything which I had in that 2-3 slides with that fish and the farm and these wordings. So everything is clear. These charts are called donut charts, kind of a pie chart, but if you can clearly show them, and if you can clearly use this as a visual aid, I'm sure that there's a purpose. Presentation presentation කරන්න ආවම අපි කරන ලොකුම වැරද්දක් තමයි එකක් presentation slide එකක් හදනවා. ඒ slide එක ඉතාම complex slide එකක්. Sometimes you fed up with මේ වගේ එකක් දැක්කම මිනිස්සුෙකුට බලන්න හිතෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක නිසා අපි මතක තියාගන්න visual aid එකක් කියන්නේ උදව්වට ගන්න දෙයක් මිසක් ඒකෙන් තවත් මිනිස්සු stress කරන්න එපා සහ ඔයාගේ lecture note එක හැටියට මේක පාවිච්චි කරන්න එපා. ඒක නෙමෙයි presentation එක කියන්නේ. තවත් animation දාලා ගැලපෙන්නේ නැතිව දාලා ඊට පස්සේ අපි කතා කරේ කොහොමද presentation එක සහ presenter වෙන් කරලා හඳුනගන්න ඒ දෙන්න කර යුතු good practices ටික ගොඩාක් complex ඒවා දාගන්න නැතුව space එක free තියාගෙන සරල fonts පාවිච්චි කරන්න සහ එකම template එකක් හොඳ flow එකක් යන template එකක් පාවිච්චි කරන්න සහ ඒකම quality photographs or images ගන්න ඕන නම් ඒවා පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒකේ වෙන තවත් complex වෙලා ඒක clear නැතුව මිනිස්සු ඒක දිහා බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා මොනවද මේ තියෙන්නේ කියලා. So it doesn't serve the purpose. Graphics පාවිච්චි කරනවා. ඉතාමත්ම වැදගත්. බරපතල graphics pie charts අරමුණ දාලා පටලවන්න එපා මිනිස්සුන්ට. ඒක මිනිස්සු තවත් මේක සංකීර්ණ කරගන්නවා සහ අර දෙන්න යන message එක හරියට clearly pass වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අවසන් present ගැන පොඩ්ඩක් කතා කරා. presentersලා කියන්නේ දිහා බලාගෙන වචන ටික කියවන එක නෙමෙයි. ඒ වගේම තමයි පිටිපස්ස හැරලා පස්සපැත්ත පෙන්නගෙන ඉන්න stage එකකින් ඒක නෙමෙයි presentations කියන්නේ. සහ තමන්ගේ confidence එක තමන් present කෙනෙක් හැටියට stage එකේ දකින්න තියෙන confidence අපි කතා කරපු අනිත් හැම දෙයක්ම eye contact gestures ඔය ඔක්කොම ටික මේ presentation එක ASCII තියෙන්න ඕන presenter ඇතුලේ තියෙන්න ඕන සහ audience එකත් එක්ක පුළුවන් නම් කතා බහ කරලා හරි මොනවාරි ක්‍රමවේද පාවිච්චි කරලා engage වෙන්න ඕන. අන්තිම කාර්යය මම කිව්වේ මේ මොනවා කරන්නද පෙර සූදානමක් ඉතාම වැදගත්. rehearsals practices very important. That's what drives you and that's what makes you a better presenter and makes it a better presentation. මම අර කිව්ව කතන්දර ඔක්කොම ටික මම එක ස්ලයිඩ් එකකට මේ වගේ graphic එකක් දානවා. මම පෙන්නන පොඩි උදාහරණයක් පෙන්නුවේ. ඒක නිසා try කරන්න. ගොඩාක් දේවල් දාන්න හදන්න එපා. මිනිස්සුන්ට මම මේ කිව්ව clear space තියලා පොඩි graphics දෙකකින් self explanatory පේනවා. හරියට මෙන්න මේ population එක ගැන කතා කරා. එයාගේ GDP contribution එක කතා කරා. ඒතර මෙතන ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා කියලා පේනවා. So we have to think of something. Then you can go to the next level. මිනිසුන් ඔළුවට මේව වැටුණාට පස්සේ මේ ඉමේජ් එක ක්ලියර් වෙනවා. මිනිස්සු මේක හොඳට මතක තියාගන්න. මේ ඉලක්කම් දෙක මතක නැති වුණත් මිනිසුන්ට අඩුම ගානේ මතකයි ටිකක් ලොකු ගාණක් තිබ්බ, තව ලොකු ගාණක් මේ පැත්තේ තිබ්බ. නමුත් කුඩා ගණන් දෙකක් මේ පැත්තේ තිබ්බේ. So it represents agriculture in this amber color and the blue color represent fisheries, but their contribution to the GDP has 7% and 1% very small bars. එතකොට message එක මෙතනින් යනවා. So that's the whole purpose. And finally, I need to show you something about this clicker. This is not a big or rocket science tool of using it, but try to use this clicker as much as possible. There are certain tools, and obviously you know that how to go up and down, because it makes you easy to go to the audience and go on stage and be comfortable with the audience. Instead, you have to go come to the laptop and change it and go to the school. Come and change and go. No, it will not work. At the same time, this particular slideshow black screen, which I mentioned there. If you see this, there is a symbol very low to these keys, which you can click it, and you can keep the whole presentation blank or black screen, which means you have no presentation at all behind you, which means the whole audience get attracted to you. If you need to tell something apart from this presentation, just make it blank and talk to the audience. And again, if you need to go back, you put the slideshow, and if you need to get their attention to certain areas, obviously you have to be side-oriented and then talk to the slide as well as to the audience. If you need to properly take their attention. Therefore, you cannot simply say that, okay, this is the best way of doing it, but depends on the circumstances. You have to be able to manage them. Movie number 4. The Founder. Okay, I watched this movie. This is all about the inception, in fact, not the inception, the franchise part of this McDonald's. This person is of that age. I can say he's hungry to be successful, regardless of the age. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, you have to have that hunger to be successful. It gives a clear message within that movie itself, with about 60s or 65 of his age, how he thrived his business, and in fact he franchised and become a good entrepreneur at the end of his life. And he has tried many of strategies, and from his sales personal career, maybe started from a very young age, he tried several strategies. He has tried many of aspects, and many of the times he failed. Ultimately, he succeeded. What I love the most, he has his own way of making a presentation, how I relate it. Obviously, that movie is quite inspirational, but finally, I've seen him. He has, when he comes to do a presentation or a speech, finally, when he becomes a famous businessman, he asks to come to some universities and some other ceremonies to make some presentations, and he just have a piece of papers and set of piece of papers. You might have seen some small notes, which mostly the doctors use. Likewise, he has set of papers, say 10 papers, and he has 1 point each written in paper, and then it is number 1 and 1 point. Once it is done, he change it and go back, put it down, put at last. Then he says second point. Talk about, then put at last. Likewise, he has a very good, his own method. What I wanted to highlight to you, I might tell some ways and means, and I might share some of my experience, but what I recommend you to have your own method of delivering it, to have your own ways of doing it, provided that it is comfortable for you. That's all. Simple as that. අවසානයේ මේ ෆිල්ම් එක ප්‍රසිද්ධ ෆිල්ම් එකක් මම රෙකමන්ඩ් කරන එකක් බලන්න. අද ෆිල්ම් බලන්න තමයි කනග මේක ෆවුන්ඩර් මයිකල් කේටන් කියන්නේ නළුවා. ඇත්තටම රේ ක්‍රොක්ස් කියන චරිතය තමයි අතන පෙන්නන්නේ. ඒ චරිතය තමයි රංගපාන්නේ. ඇත්තටම සත්‍ය කතාවක් ඉස්සර මේකත් ඇදෙන්නේ මැක්ඩොනල්ඩ්ස් කියන ව්‍යාපාර සමූහය කොහොමද පටන් ගත්තේ? පටන් ගත්ත තැන නෙමෙයි අතන එතන කොහොමද ඒක ෆ්‍රැන්චයිස් කරේ. මේක ලෝකෙ පුරා කොහොමද පැතිරලා ගියේ කියන්නේ ඒකට නිර්මාතෘවරයා තමයි මේ ද ෆවුන්ඩර් කියන ටොපික් එක ඇතුළත තියෙනවා. රේ ක්‍රොක්ස් කියන නමින් ඉන්නේ. ඒක තමයි මැක්ඩොනල්ඩ්ස් කියන කියවල බලපුවම අපිට තේරෙයි. ඇත්තටම මැක්ඩොනල්ඩ්ස් කියන නම තියෙන අයියා මල්ලි කෙනෙක්. ඒ දෙන්න අන්තිමට එක ෂොප් එකයි තියෙන්නේ. මෙයා තමයි ලෝකෙම බිස්නස් එක රන් කරන්න ගත්තේ. මේකෙදි විශේෂයෙන්ම වයසට ගිහිල්ලා හුඟක් දේවල් try කරලා fail වෙලා හුඟක් දේවල් failure ඇතුළේ හුඟක් experience අරගෙන තමයි මෙයා මෙතනට එන්නේ. මෙයා අන්තිම කාලේ අවුරුදුට විතර පැනනට පස්සේ තමයි මෙන්න මේ බිස්නස් එක හරියට පික් කරන්නේ. එතනදී මම කියන්නේ එක එක ස්ට්‍රැටජිස් පාවිච්චි කරලා fail වෙනවා. නමුත් අන්තිමට මම succeed වෙන්නේ own method එකකින්. මෙයා එක තැනකදී මම දැක්ක විශේෂ දෙයක් තමයි ස්පීචස් වලට මම සම්බන්ධ කරගත්තොත් මෙයා අපි දන්නවා ව්‍යාපාරිකව ප්‍රසිද්ධ වුණාට පස්සේ මෙයාට එක විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවලින් සහ වෙනත් දේශන වලට කතා කරනවා. මෙයා ගාව තියෙනවා කුඩා පොඩි notes තියෙන පොඩි කොළ කැලි ටිකක්. ඒකේ මම දැක්කයි අන්තිමට පෙන්න movie එකේදී ඒ number කරලා තියෙනවා. සහ ඒකේ පොඩි topic එකක් දෙලා තියෙනවා. For example මුලින් තියෙනවා හැඳින්වීම introduction to, so in my field I can say introduction to electrical system, power generation. ඊට පස්සේ පොඩ්ඩක් කතා කරලා ඉගෙන transmission systems, power transmission, how it transmitted to Colombo from the place where it produced from, maybe from Norwich or from Lakshapana. Then third point, how the area distribution, how this distribution along the villages and the city. Then how to do the troubleshooting. Then how to do the maintenance and the Q&A session. Likewise, he has his own method. But I need you to do, there are some recommended methods. But if you can either be connecting those things or you can have your own methods. It can be your business perspective, it can be the way you deliver your job, it can be the way you deliver your speech or a presentation. Let me share with some of my own experience. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is my own opinion and these are some of my own tips which I try to make myself. Because the first one, we call that English moment or think in English is very important. I'm not going to betray to the country, but very important point, which you try to have a good flow of English. If I could remember that even the first presentation, DTM Salim highlighted the point that you have to think in English, then only you can have a good flow. Means, if you think in Sinhala, convert into English and make your speech. Again, if you get something from somebody else to the brain, convert into Sinhala and have your answer processed in Sinhala and then convert into English, deliver, it will not work. Simply, you cannot make this English environment around you, but you can create some English moments within yourself. Number one, movies, which I love the most. So English movies, watch them with English subtitles and try to read them out very fast. So you will end up with good English thinker. And try to listen to these English radio DJs and some news anchors in particular when it comes to BBC or CNN or sometimes it's Australian news, ABC networks. If you can watch them instead of wasting your time, and even when you dress up, for example, myself, when I get ready to go to work in the morning, I switch on BBC or CNN or ABC, where I might not much worried about the geopolitics, but I love to read them out. At the same time, I love the way that they speak in English. So that environment you create to listen to them, especially in the morning, it will give you a good message. And there are some few new words and the way of delivery, you can practice yourself. Try to create English moments around you, and the preparation is very important. Anything, as I mentioned, that rehearsals are very important. At the same time, try with different reference materials. Even I myself getting ready to this presentation, I referred many of these, some YouTube, some TED Talks, some podcasts. I tried a lot. And I think that if you have free time, especially maybe you're driving, maybe you're waiting for somebody to come. For example, in my case, I have some moments of to pick my kids from school, maybe from their practices. So I have fair time of waiting times. Try to use those waiting times for a purpose instead of going to Facebook and try it. I don't like to tell you that don't go to Facebook. Yeah, you can go for a purpose. At the same time, try to utilize them properly, to watch to a good YouTube video, to good TED Talk or a good podcast. And especially while you preparing, make sure that you write down a script at least and incorporate with some anecdotes or some skeleton of your speech. Otherwise, this preparation will not be helpful. Rehearsals, how to do rehearsals? We know that the opening, body and conclusion has to be within that speech, but you might not get enough time to rehearse everything at once. Maybe if it is a 30-minute speech, for example, in my case today, I have about 1 hour to 1.5 hours of speech. So I cannot practice it in a single stretch. Instead, I can practice some segment by segment. So the opening, I practice opening because I know opening is very important. If you make a mistake at the opening, and if you get excited at the opening, and if you make some blunders at the opening, definitely people would not love to listen to you. So you can practice the opening part separately over the first 5 minutes, first 10 minutes, you practice. And maybe later once you have free time, practice the conclusion. Where I do my practice, maybe in the morning I have a jogging time of at least about 30-40 minutes. So I have a free time. I keep my mobile phone inside the car, and when I was jogging around, I used to have my own mind mapping. At the same time, I do my rehearsals as well. And also, especially people are in Colombo, who goes to work in Colombo, I'm sure that you got a lot of driving time, 1 hour, 1.5 hours sometimes, morning and evening, or sometimes you use some the other commuting method, maybe your staff vehicle or train. You will get a lot of time where you can do your practices and listening and rehearsals. Mirror talks, I think Shireen have highlighted the other day. If you can talk to your mirror, it's not just the practicing of your speech itself, but the gesture and the body language and the stance. You can see it properly. How the audience would see you can be visualized by yourself. Therefore, you can think, okay, I have to change myself. I have to keep my posture straight. I have to have my hands relaxed. So everything happens in front of a mirror. Those who go to gyms, I'm sure that people have installed a lot of mirrors around you in a gym or a workout area to see your balance, particularly when you make some weights lifted. So through the mirror, you can see if it is balanced or unbalanced. So that is very important to talk to a mirror. And finally, I'm sure that many of your laptops right now are comprised with a webcam. And the best thing, once you are alone inside the office, which I used to do, and nobody is around you. So you just take 5 minutes time, open your laptop and put this webcam in and put into the video mode and have a video recording. You talk something. No need to be a prepared speech. You just talk something which you love to talk. You talk about some cricket, the Sri Lankan cricket team now in New Zealand, and today's match was a brilliantly played like this. You just talk to the webcam and record yourself and try with your own English. Record it and see how it is. Then you don't need any more coaches, mentors. You can mentor yourself. Finally, I love this Toastmaster activities, and I've been in Toastmasters for as I mentioned, last 8 years. Not just to get the membership. I got the membership and I engaged with them, and I played some leadership roles, contests sometimes, and education presentations. It doesn't matter and doesn't work at all. Once you get the membership, no, you will not improve your language skill or your presentation skills or your orations. You have to engage with activities, do these leadership roles, and try to be at contests and try to practice some education presentations. Then only you will end up. Final movie today, Dangal. I'm sure many of you have watched this. This is again based on a true story, famous Amir Khan acting. As a father of these kids, girls, all are girls, and how they excel their career in wrestling back in India, and how they overcome. And this is one of the brilliant movies which I've watched, and I recommend you to watch. At the same time, just show to your kids. Key message here is the dedicated coaching and grooming, and this father himself has a lot of fight against his own surroundings, his own villages and his own tribes around, and his cultural barriers what he had, he overcome by taking his own leadership to their kids. When you do something, there could be challenges around you for sure. So the dedicated coaching, a person who coach you, who groom you, will definitely be a good personality to drive you to the target or the destination of your journey. What he always says, true that you have to add your skills at the same time. Whatever you know right now, the brilliant of basics is whatever you do right now, you have to be brilliant on that. There's a famous dialogue there that attack is the best defense, because he trained his kids to attack in the game of wrestling. Because sometimes the other coach wanted to do some defense, and he finally gave the message that, okay, go on attack mode. That's your strength. So brilliant in your basics is a key. And finally, the self-driven motivation. As I mentioned, Usain Bolt's story, and finally I wanted to highlight a self-discipline. So this is pretty much in line with the same. And if you have watched the movie, you can remember one point where those two kids, two girls, promised to themselves, okay, we will do better. Otherwise, earlier it was just like his father push him, do this, put an alarm in the early morning and go behind them with a motor bicycle and push them to do practices. But once they realize, okay, why we are doing this, it's nothing but your own development, then that's where the self-driven motivation comes in. So this presentation itself could sometimes open your eyes, but within this 1.5 hours, I cannot give you everything what I know. At the same time, you cannot learn everything. Point here is, if you have the self-driven motivation, and if you think that, okay, I do it because this is for me. I do it because this is for my family. I do it because this is for my country. And if you have that self-motivation only, you will be successful. Otherwise, you will simply be a normal person who would achieve a certain or ordinary targets. But if you need to be extraordinary, or if you need to be excel with your career, you have to be self-motivated. If I'm to summarize, as it is almost 9 o'clock, we talked about some analogies of starting with the movie, and talked about Usain Bolt, and we knew that the opening body and the conclusion matters, and try to write down a script at least as a skeleton or a guideline of your speech. That would definitely be helpful. And the rehearsal and the preparation are the key behind. And we talked about Usain Bolt of 5 minutes of running on the track, but 12 to 20 years of practices behind the track. And the delivery techniques, we touched a little bit about this: eye contact, vocal variety, body language, and the gestures. Again, I can simply put into one single slide, but these whole subjects are quite a bit of a heavy weight, which you have to work strongly alone. Finally, we talked about the visual aids and how to do a good visual aid, and not this word by word reading. It's not presentation. I took some examples called TED Talks, where I recommend about 20-30 minutes of TED Talks would definitely guide you. And try to search in YouTube some good TED Talks. Those who are in the WhatsApp groups of our communities, we used to share 1 or 2 TED Talks with the members of the WhatsApp group, and that would definitely guide you and give you a classic example of how to do this. Then we talked about 2 movies, about English for English and The King's Speech, which sometimes people have their own justification to themselves, that I'm from a rural village and my school didn't have an English teacher. Those are not excuses at all. And even if you meet these speech impediments, as I mentioned there, the King's Speech, or the king who had these difficulties, had to recover himself and had to accomplish the best milestones in his life. Because he was a king, he has to do it. And we had support from his wife and a friend or specialist speech therapist, and finally they succeeded. We talked about this vocabulary, a good vocabulary and vivid images. If you can create some vivid images or vivid language, this is the best way of doing it. And obviously we have challenges of thinking in English. That slows down with your English flow or speaking flow, where you have to create or inculcate some surroundings around you. We call that English moments. You create some English moments. You're listening to these English channels, news channels, and watch some English movies, and read out some English papers, and go to your website with some English articles. Those are few areas of creating your moments. And we talked about another 2 movies called Founder and Dangal, which coaching and mentoring matters a lot. And we finally talked about my own methods, especially about this Toastmasters. And finally, I would like to highlight the same skill which I mentioned somewhere in the beginning, somewhere midway, which is swimming is a skill. You might not be an expert in swimming, maybe even the different ages, even at 30s or 40s, you might not be able to swim. Still, it's a skill where you have a good coach and a good pool, You have to obviously jump into the pool. And finally, you have to follow this coach instruction to have a good techniques of swimming. And you have to continuously go to the pool to excel yourself. Then that skill get definitely developed. අවසන වශයෙන් අපි කාරණා ගොඩක් ගැන කතා කරා. මම අන්තිම කාරණා ගැන විතරක් කියන්නම්. මම ස්විමින් ගැන කතා කරමු නිසා. ඒක ඇත්තටම ස්කිල් එකක් කියලා අපි කියන්නේ අර ටැලන්ට් එකක් නෙමෙයි. ඒ කියන්නේ බෝන් ටැලන්ට්ස් කියලා අපි කියන්නේ ඉපදින්ම ආපු සහජ හැකියාවන්. එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ස්පීච් අපි කියන්නේ මේ කතා කරන දේවල් සහ ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් කියන එකත් ස්කිල් එකක්. ඒක ඩෙවලොප් කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල්. ඒ කියන්නේ එක දිගට ප්‍රැක්ටිස් කරලා හොඳ කෝච් කෙනෙක්, හොඳ මෙන්ටර්ස්ලාගේ ගයිඩන්ස් එක ඒ කියන ටෙක්නික්ස් සහ දේවල් තමන් විසින් ෆලෝ කරලා ඒක කන්සිස්ටන්ට්ලි යූස් කරලා ඩෙවලොප් කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් තමයි ස්කිල්ස් කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒක තමයි උදාහරණයක් කිව්වොත් ස්විමින් කියන එක. ඒක පොතෙන් ඉගෙන ගන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. අනිවාර්යෙන් ඔබට ඒකට වතුරට බහින්න වෙනවා. වතුරට බැස්සට පස්සේ තේරෙයි තමන් කරන අඩුපාඩු ටික. එතකොට ඒකට හොඳ කෙනෙක් එළියේ නම් බලාගෙන ඉඳලා මේක කරෙක්ට් කරන හැටි ගයිඩ් කරාට පස්සේ ඒ ගයිඩ් කරන ටෙක්නික්ස් හරියට ෆලෝ කරලා දිගටම පූල් එකේ ගිහලා ස්විමින් කරොත් බැරි වෙන්නේ. ඒක නිසා it's pretty much ඒක අතම කිව්වොත් මේ භාෂා හැසිරවීම, ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන්ස් කිරීම සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම සභාවක ඉදිරියේ කතා කිරීම කියන කාරණා වුණත් මේවට අපි කියන්නේ ස්කිල්ස් කියලා. සමහර වෙලාවට බය හිතෙනවා. නමුත් නොකරන තාක් කාල කවදාකවත් ඔයාලට එතනින් එහාට ඉම්ප්‍රූව් වෙන්න බෑ. කරාට පස්සේ තමයි තේරෙන්නේ මගෙත් මෙන්න මේ ටැලන්ට්ස් තිබ්බා කියලා. නැත්නම් අර අපි කියනවා බටර්ෆ්ලයිස් ඉන් යර් ස්ටොමක් කියලා කියන පිටු ගහනවා. හැබැයි ඔයාලා කියනවා ඉරෂනල් ඩිසීසස් කියලා. කවදාකවත් හැදෙන්නේ නැති ලේට ඒවට ඔයාලා හිතනවා මම කලන්තේ දාලා වැටේ ස්ටේජ් එකේ කියලා. ඒව වෙන්නේ නැහැ ගියපුවාම. I'm stuck වෙන්න පුළුවන්. සමහරවිට කකුල් වේවුලා. So I have felt it and I still feel it. So that's quite natural. The only thing is you have to have your own tools to overcome them. With that remark, I think I'm into this, the latter part, or in fact the conclusion of the course session. Sanjay, we can make the floor open for Q&A if they have question and answer questions, and I might try my best to respond with my answers.
Yeah, actually, it's very important for all of us. As a viewer, I also learn a lot from you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Nalin. And now we have enabled the chat box. And if you have any question, you can send it on the chat box. And also you can use the raise hand option to ask any question. We can give you the opportunity. Since we are getting till we get any question from the audience, I have one question, Mr. Nalin, that when we are speaking in English, especially, we have some worries about the pronunciation. Some words we think, is it the correct pronunciation actually we are doing? So how to get that confirmed and how to prepare in a rehearsal the correct pronunciation, how to get that point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And number one is, as I mentioned earlier, we don't need to be that Suddas accent. I can simply say that you don't try to be extraordinary. Sort of sometimes you feel that, okay, this guy is trying to be over smart, because having this brown skin, and quite obviously we are from the South Asian part of the world, so people know that. Instead, don't try to be too smart and don't try to show that it's different accent, and all of a sudden you might, in between, you might tell or speak out or voice out something which is completely in a different way. And again, pronunciation could be different from accent to accent, and generally the Americans have different pronunciation, and UK people at the same time, Australians have completely different accents. So trying to follow them could sometimes end up with a disaster. And again, having said that, I would love if you can pronounce properly the words which I mentioned. I mostly listen to these dialogues, in movies, and you know me that I used to watch a lot of cricket matches, and this pronunciation from good cricket commentators, except this, I should say in front of you, not discrimination, but except this Indian accent. If you can go through with this good English accents, definitely you will end up with a good way of making pronunciation. And again, the final tip, which I've shared even in my presentation, go to Google and type something, the meaning. For example, I've shown one screen as engineer meaning. Then you type the meaning through the Google and you will get the meaning, synonyms, everything. And at the same time, you get one speaker symbol where you can click there and it pronounces for you. And that's what you have to try. That's the best way of doing it, which I personally find is the best way of doing it. And also try to engage with dialogues. If you find somebody with good English, try to engage with him and try to listen. Good English would definitely help you. And again, avoid listening to bad English. That's again a good way of doing it. And while you're listening to good English, again, you have to listen and you have to avoid listening to bad English. I never watched the English, or in fact, the news channel of NDTV, which is the Indian origin channel. I have to tell it in front of you because it will definitely make yourself completely away from this proper pronunciation. And instead, though the channels have their own propagandas, but I watch this BBC, CNN, and ABC. Sanjay.
Thanks. We have one question from Lasana Veeratunga. Lasana,
Yes,
you can
thanks
ask
for
a
the
question.
yes, thanks for the opportunity. And when it goes to the presentation, of course, gesture is very important, as you all know. And there, our hand movements and hands plays a very crucial or very important role. But my question is, which I as well, it should be in the rest. Where should I keep? Because I always get that problem. When I want to articulate something, yes, I can use my hands. But when I don't want to use it, how should I keep it? Yeah, I hope you got my question.
Yeah, that's. I think there were some certain lines break here and there, but I think the core question behind is once you use this gesture, you use it properly and you know how to use it. And once you have no gestures to be used, then what you should do? Yeah, I do have this pretty much the same question. And again, the non-recommended way is this crutch, the way of having this. And there are certain ways of obstructing the audience. People say that obstruct the audience are not recommended. Trying to show that obstructing audience and this closing modes, people say close it. So therefore, try to be open-armed. And definitely you end up with doing something when you talk anything. The best way is, again, the recommended way is to have this open palm, but again, you cannot show the open palm in the biggest mode for every time. So sometimes you have to talk, and especially once you have this clicker, it helps a lot for me. That's my personal sort of an experience. This clicker would sometimes helpful, and sometimes you can use the clicker without obstructing. You can use this clicker from one hand to the other hand and have a chat. Likewise, that's what I do generally. And once you are in front of a podium, then again, you can show some notes or something to touch with the podium sometimes, which is again not the recommended way, but you have to use it. And for the worst case, what I do when it comes to lectures and other presentations, I walk through the audience. If I have a FM mic and the clicker within my hand, and if I'm within the zone of the proximity of these signal strengths, and I used to walk to the audience and I have a chat with them. I used to tap or have a chat with and a tap to backside of these participants. Likewise, I try to use some other techniques if I'm blank with the content. I hope that I tried my best to answer.
Yeah. Lasana, I hope you got the answer.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Nalin, we have a few questions in chat box also. There's a question about this watching English movies. Is it okay to watch with subtitles, or is it better listen to what they speak? What is the best way?
Sorry,
your opinion.
With a subtitle or not?
Yes.
Yes. It's again, the subtitles are for a different purpose. In fact, subtitles are for it's not for us to learn English. It's in fact for the deaf people, people who cannot listen. That's the subtitles are for, but we can use the subtitle for the purpose of our learning purpose, in fact, in English, to learn the language of English. Again, without subtitle, if you can watch, what I used to do, personally, I watch the movies without subtitle at once. Sometimes many dialogues I cannot follow. So in some cases, what I used to do, then I put the subtitle on and then read through them as quick as possible. And that could make my mind to quite faster to respond, and that could be helpful, and that have helped me to learn myself the language.
Yeah, another question in chat box, that what is the best, it means the question is, there are two types of pronunciation, pronounced as British and American, and I'm confused which one is good. Can you please let me know which one is useful to practice? British accent or American accent?
Yeah, because again, my favorite accent is the British accent. And again, the Australian accent is maybe the best way of having the pronunciation, because the Australians have a mixture of these Americans and English accents. But my recommendation is, because I don't think that we are from these Commonwealth countries, but we can have this English accent. The British way is fairly good and recommended. But again, Americans, they use it for different demanding or commanding way of doing it. But the British one is quite a professional way. Again, depends on the place where you live, like especially the Canadian or Mexican, the region, the Northern American region, they respect for this English accent. And those who like to do some PhDs or higher studies or plan to live in America, try to go along with this thing, the American accent. But if you are trying to do work in European region, and is particularly working in these Asian countries and even Australian or the Far East, try with this original English accent, which is the British accent.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. And another question. Meantime, we will share the attendance marking sheet, and participants can mark the attendance. And there's another question about the English language grammar, that I think most of the people has knowledge, that when they are writing the script, they are okay and they're doing well with the grammars. But when we are speaking, we are getting struggle to use proper grammar. What is the best way to overcome that mistake?
Yeah, I think the biggest reason, which in my case, I have found in my cases, if I'm trying to write down the longer sentences, and if I'm trying to make some complex sentences, I end up good in writing the script, but I end up bad in pronouncing or bad in presenting. Try to make some simplest of sentences, and also the key grammar areas like the present tense, past tense, active and passive, singular and plural. Those areas you don't have any excuses to make mistakes. So making some simplest way of the script, having some simple statements or simple sentences would help you out. And again, you need a lot of practices to do that, and also have some nervousness, like the less nervous, and have some confidence by rehearsing. At the same time, don't try to be too fast, and don't try to flood with your ideas quickly and flooded with and try to explain everything at once. Take some calm, breathe, relax, get some pauses, then you will be okay with your language. Otherwise, if you try to express them so fast, end up with a lot of grammar mistakes. We can see a lot of Indians keep on talking, and sometimes our people also keep on talking, but in between you cannot understand what he talked about. What's the connectivity with this?
Okay, thank you very much. I think there may be a lot of questions and points to clear, because this is a very vast area that we have discussed. And there's another question: what is your opinion on having summary sheets of the presentation while doing it? Is it okay to keep a summary sheet with?
Summary sheet means at the
Give
end
the
of
presentation,
the presentation.
as a support for the presenter.
Okay, could be two ways. Like maybe he refers as summary sheet. Maybe at the end of the speech, if you are to give a summary to on his way of things, and I think it's very important, especially when it comes to a lecture note, or we call that informative type of speeches. Like if it is a lecture or presentation on some technical subjects, if you have a summary at the end, that could be helpful definitely for them to understand and what he was. And if you meant as a summary is a sort of a guidance to your speech, that's something which even I myself do it. Because if, as I mentioned, that we have a good script, say about 2 pages of script, but what I used to do, highlight certain keywords in between from one paragraph to the other paragraph. So that keyword itself gives me, okay, my topic is under that segment. Then when it comes to the second paragraph, I have another keyword. So likewise, I have about 10 keywords to make my flow. So that's another way of having a maybe referred summary, which I personally used to do. That's kind of a mind mapping. We call it technically, it's a mind mapping process.
Yeah, I think the question is similar that because they are asking that when looking at this summary sheet, it can distract the eye contact with the audience.
Yes.
So you want to clarify that. So as you said, Ms. Nalin, that if you have only one word to remind that the section what we are going to talk, that will not distract, is it?
Yeah, obviously it is. Yeah, when it comes to look at some notes in your hand, will definitely give you the less confidence to the audience. So try not to use them. But if you are in a big, like something which is very important, which if you miss, that could be a mistake, then definitely you have to follow. So you can put them on the lectern. That's number one. I think you might have seen even Steve Jobs do speeches, putting up small note, even the Mark Zuckerberg do it with a small note in on the lecture or on the podium itself. Or else your presentations, if you have the presentation slides there, and those images or one topic itself could sometimes drive you. And even in some of these presentations, like in auditoriums, now you have this back screens, as well as there are some front displays for you to guide your presentation. So there are certain tools, and even mostly the famous speakers, even the presidents right now, they are using these teleprompts to support their speech instead of looking at notes on his hands or on the podium.
Okay, Ms. Nalin, I think we have come to the end of the program because it's already we have come to 9:30 now time. So, Ms. Nalin, we would like to hear some final remarks for the audience to motivate themselves to be public speakers and improve their techniques.
Thanks. Thanks, Anjay. Best thing which I think the rehearsals are very important, and obviously. And what I think is people are trying to misuse some opportunities. Sometimes they are not using opportunities at all. Therefore, please try to find a place where you can practice yourself. You cannot practice alone. You have to have some good mentors. You have to have some good audience to give you some feedbacks. At the same time, as I mentioned, that Toastmaster is something which I'm passionate about. And I get a lot of opportunities. And if I get an opportunity, I will never miss that. I take all of them as opportunities. People used to say that challenges, and I like to repress it as opportunities. Even this presentation itself is an opportunity for me to try myself and get some feedbacks. I've seen good and bad. Obviously, there could be some returns to me, but those things would definitely be helpful. And if you don't try it, you will never learn, and you will be failed in bigger stages. But try to don't be afraid to fail in smaller stages, and it will definitely be helpful for you. And please try to find a place even to fail. And then you will definitely be successful, and you have to try yourself, and you have to try, in fact, in a positive way. This is the concept called Kaizen, which you have to change yourself. If you think that it will not work, you have to try something different. Then you will find your own way of doing it, properly doing it. And the message to everybody is rehearse yourself, prepare yourself, and get yourself engaged and involved as much as possible. Then that could give you a good experience. Once you are experienced enough, then you would would not feel nervous. Though you feel nervous, it can be tolerated, or you can manage yourself with those nervousness. Sanjay?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. Nalin. I think it's time to conclude our session. So before that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Nalin for this presentation, which has enlightened us, especially about this public speaking development, and also to thank organizing this kind of program to the audience, the public, which will support to develop and overcome the issues that they are facing. So with that remark, we are going for the conclusion. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being nice audience, and also throughout all the sessions. And we will have our 5th session in next week, and we will get the details through our WhatsApp groups and via email. So once again, thanks for being nice audience to dinner tonight, and thank you very much, and good night to all. Thank you, Mr. Nalin, once again for your great presentation and knowledge sharing today with us.
Thank you.
Good night.